The armed forces love their rules, regulations, and oh so many acronyms, but they also have some surprisingly strict rules you may never have heard about.
If you want to fight with the best, then you'd better be able to run, swim, kill, and even drink with them too. These are the written and unwritten rules of the US Navy's SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 has something of a storied history, and not necessarily for the best reasons. In 1980, SEAL Team 6 was founded by Navy SEAL Richard Marcinko, who entered the project with a plan to build an elite unit of soldiers made in his image. These weren't supposed to be perfect, disciplined, obedient soldiers. His call was for rebels, outlaws, criminals. In his own words, if you want to call them sociopaths, you can. SEAL Team 6 is not really a military unit as much as it is a mafia. In keeping with that, members of the original incarnation of SEAL Team 6 were expected to fit right into Marcinko's band of outlaws. Soldiers who joined and tried to enforce discipline, or complained about the lack of it, were swiftly kicked out of the unit. Meanwhile, Marcinko explained that he wanted any problems to stay in-house while painting himself as a pseudo-mob boss. No outsiders were to get involved. That's just how he ran things. There was another unofficial rule, too. Members had to be able to hold their alcohol. Marcinko himself confessed to using alcohol as a tool and typically conducted his interviews in a bar. If a potential recruit couldn't keep up with him, then they weren't making it into the unit. Since SEAL Team 6 is one of the most elite military units in the US Armed Forces, it only makes sense that the recruitment process is extremely demanding. The initial training program for the SEALs is known colloquially as BUDS, or Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training. As part of this process, recruits undergo grueling physical activities such as miles-long runs and swims and long periods of exposure to the elements. On top of that is the Navy SEALs' infamous Hell Week, known for the fact that recruits typically only get about 4 hours of sleep while experiencing hallucinations, hypothermia, and naturally, pain.
Sore.
Yeah.
Very sore. Like everything's just tight, cramping up.
Yeah, ready to attack it though.
Yeah.
Only a fraction of candidates make it through, and there have been some Navy SEALs who died during their training. And then you have to actually get onto SEAL Team 6. Candidates must be at least 21 and under 28 years old, have served as Navy SEALs for at least 5 years, deployed at least twice, and be eligible for high-level security clearance. Then they have to file a form called a Special Request Chit, which is required for SEALs to do almost anything, whether that's get a tattoo, moving off base, or of course, considering eligibility for SEAL Team 6. Assuming all of that goes smoothly, candidates are closely vetted by a panel of their superiors who ask about any and all aspects of their lives. Though the exact statistics are difficult to pin down, it's thought that only half of all candidates make it through. Since soldiers constantly face life and death situations, it's easy to understand that they might be quick to pull the trigger. And generally speaking, the US military is actually somewhat understanding on that front. Soldiers are trained not to kill unnecessarily, but what if they misjudge the situation and end up killing someone who, in hindsight, wasn't actually posing a threat? The law would have to get involved, of course, but legally, the assumption of a threat can be enough to clear a soldier of technical wrongdoing. Former SEAL Team 6 operators have spoken about this in the past, however, explaining that, for them, such an argument wouldn't hold up. For example, one SEAL Team sniper killed 3 different unarmed individuals while in Afghanistan and gave his commanding officers that exact response. He had felt they were a threat at the time, but he wasn't fully absolved of guilt. On the contrary, he was kicked out of the unit. In SEAL Team 6, the threat has to be real, not just assumed. Those who break this rule, operators have claimed, are punished harshly. Generally speaking, SEAL Team 6 missions are authorized to use only non-lethal force, taking prisoners, hurting non-combatants out of their way, or knocking them out. But let's not sugarcoat it. These non-lethal tactics are still brutal, and when they do shoot, they shoot to kill. SEAL Team 6 is by its very nature an incredibly secretive organization. They engage in some of the most sensitive operations across the globe, so letting information slip is potentially catastrophic. Members of clandestine branches of the US military have explained that NDAs are used to outline what they're allowed to talk about. This includes taking consulting gigs, and on at least one occasion, members of SEAL Team 6 were caught misusing confidential information in their side gigs. Some years back, 7 SEALs were paid to consult on Medal of Honor Warfighter, and though the game didn't divulge the details of any real missions, it does accurately depict the nature of SEAL Team 6 operations.
Everybody says they're an assaulter, but I'd say very few actually are.
None of the operators filled out any of the requisite paperwork, and that none of them had been granted permission to take on such a job. They were all punished and barred from receiving future promotions. This insistence on secrecy hasn't stopped some SEAL Team 6 members from profiting from their knowledge elsewhere, though. The book No Easy Day, for example, detailed the famous raid on Osama bin Laden's final hiding place. It was written by Mark Bissonnette, a member of the assault team during the operation. But those non-disclosure agreements are no joke. After years of litigation, Bissonnette ended up settling his lawsuit with the US government, and he paid back all his royalties, $6.8 million. SEAL Team 6 missions tend to be violent operations. As former members have reported, in high-risk scenarios, they're supposed to shoot to kill, and if that means unloading a magazine into a body, so be it. Additionally, there is a general acknowledgement by both military and government organizations that SEAL Team 6 often engages in what we could say is legally dubious activities, and that means it takes people with quite the strong stomach to handle the job. But more than that, operators aren't supposed to make a big deal of their operations. They must be able to blend into civilian life as well as work in stressful military operations, and they have to switch between the two seamlessly. According to one ex-SEAL, you're asking guys to commit murder, turn around, fly home, and go back to their home life without missing a beat. Kill somebody in the morning, be home in time for dinner with the family, and pretend it never happened. SEAL Team 6 operations have sparked more than a few conversations regarding the ethics of the team's work. In general, many of those questions concern civilian casualties. Essentially, are SEAL Team 6 operators employing enough caution to try and avoid them? Many people think not. One particular operation carried out in a town in Afghanistan, for example, led to reports of SEALs not only engaging in civilian casualties, but also carrying out executions. In response to this controversy, a new technique was developed that required operators to literally call out to enemies, essentially asking them to surrender before attacking. The intention was to decrease the number of civilian casualties by better defining the line between enemy and innocent. But former operators have complained about the implementation of this rule, saying that it led to more casualties rather than less. Enemy combatants, they say, would take advantage of the new rule, often sending civilians out of buildings to shoot from behind them. When you think about it, how do you apply rules to a group modeled after the mob? While not technically an official rule recognized by SEAL Team 6, there is something of a tradition when it comes to disciplinary action taken against its operators, the so-called Rock of Shame. As far as anyone outside the unit can tell, SEAL Team 6 does actually have a real physical rock outside their headquarters, onto which they inscribe the names of former members they feel have essentially dishonored them in some way or another. The rock has been mentioned in regard to two different former SEALs in recent years, Robert O'Neill and Mark Bissonnette, both of whom have become controversial and polarizing figures in their own rights.
I actually hit him 3 times because I shot him twice when he was standing and once on the ground.
You already know about Bissonnette. O'Neill has a tie-in with him as well. O'Neill claimed that he delivered the lethal shot to bin Laden, which is more or less disputed by other SEALs who were part of that mission. With the lawsuits and the whole non-disclosure thing, you can see Bissonnette's issues with SEAL Team 6. Reports say that both of their names are engraved on the infamous Rock of Shame, and neither of them are welcome at the unit's headquarters. Rank is typically an important part of military structure, one in which officers are given near total responsibility and authority over the actions of enlisted men and women. If you're in SEAL Team 6, however, that's not usually the case. To be entirely clear, this isn't an explicit rule that operators are expected to follow, but it is a long-standing tradition. Enlisted soldiers are viewed as more important in SEAL Team 6 than they would be in other military units. This is because officers don't stick around too long in the units, relatively speaking. They might serve a couple of tours before rotating in and out, going on to serve with other units. In contrast, enlisted soldiers typically stay with the unit for a longer period of time, and in practice that means they have a lot more influence than would otherwise be expected. In truth, that's exactly how Richard Marcinko always wanted it. Originally an enlisted man himself, he's quoted as having once said, "You get the enlisted in charge, they are the talent." SEAL Team 6 operators are trained to use firearms, knives, and all kinds of other weapons, including one particularly surprising tool. The most notable weapon that operators have traditionally carried is in fact a hatchet. They're typically gifted a hatchet made by craftsman Daniel Winkler, who is best known for making the weapons seen in the movie The Last of the Mohicans.
In terms of when we got there, what we expected. And we were doing.
This is a gift that operators receive after their first year of service, usually paid for by outside donors, and it may also have use beyond decoration. Some operators have insisted that they never actually use their hatchets, citing the fact that they're too bulky to take on missions. But others have said that they have witnessed their peers using those hatchets to break down doors, get through locks, and even fight enemy combatants. It's been reported that at least one operator actually killed somebody with their hatchet, and a number of other operators have supported the reasoning behind using it in hand-to-hand combat. As one says, "What's the difference between shooting them as I was told and pulling out a knife and stabbing them or hatcheting them?" SEAL Team 6 is commonly known to be made up of 4 assault squadrons: Blue Squadron, Red Squadron, Gold Squadron, and Silver Squadron. But that's not all. There's also the mysterious Black Squadron. Originally made up of the unit's snipers, Black Squadron has since been retrofitted for intelligence purposes. Unlike the assault squadrons, which are typically deployed in combat zones, Black Squadron members work out of embassies scattered all around the world and follow a different set of rules, with secrecy being their guiding principle. Operators must be able to blend into any surrounding and take on any role required to carry out their work. Former operators have explained that given the covert nature of the unit's operations, they weren't allowed any room for mistakes. Intelligence had to be solid before they could proceed with missions, and they needed to be confident in their success before making a move. What's more, Black Squadron has also been known to regularly employ female operators, with men and women usually working in pairs so as to throw off suspicion from those they are pursuing.
Think you can hack it with the Green Berets? Well, you might want to brush up on your languages, and you better be sure you can grow a damn good beard. Let's just take this from the top to see if you qualify. To begin with, to join up, you must be between 17 and 35 years old, fall into the acceptable height and weight range that's tied to your age, and achieve a passing score on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And that's only the beginning.
We don't strive for the minimum, we strive for the maximum.
You can't be considered for selection as a Green Beret if you don't qualify for entrance to the airborne school, because there's a chance you'll be jumping out of planes in combat zones. You'll also need to qualify for secret security clearance, which means that if you've got anything shady in your past, your dream of joining the Special Forces is already over. If you look good on paper and excel in the initial 2-week course, then you might stand a fighting chance, which ironically starts with some chance fighting. After 61 weeks of training, more than a year, you end with a staged invasion of a fake country in the woods of North Carolina. Parlez-vous français? Non? Well, you can forget being a Green Beret. But it's not just specific to French. Special Forces might be forced to learn such difficult for English speakers tongues like Tagala or Thai, to specific regional dialects like Levantine, that's the Arabic spoken in the Middle East for the most part, or Egyptian Arabic. To prove that you'll be able to take on such a challenge, you must pass the Defense Language Aptitude Battery. This is a special test taken in a fake language which determines an applicant's potential ability as a linguist. Oh, and if you think you can coast through all that because you're already bilingual, well, guess again. In that case, you'll find yourself learning a third language so you can be sent to a wider variety of countries. If you made it into the Green Berets, you've proved that you're the best of the best. But part of being the best of the best is not going around talking about it. If you're the bragging type, you're probably not going to be a good fit, and don't even think about writing a book about it. In 2010, when the CBS News show 60 Minutes embedded with the Green Berets in Afghanistan, a soldier named Martin told the program, "We're definitely not Rambo, you know. He was a Green Beret. That's not us at all."
Don't push it. Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
The group's nickname is the Quiet Professionals, which neatly sums up what's expected of them. It's impossible to know how you would handle the pressure of a combat situation, especially if things start going wrong. But Green Berets know what they won't do: surrender. While the United States Military Code of Conduct generally mentions that soldiers shouldn't surrender, there is a bit of wiggle room in the wording. It reads, "I will never surrender of my own free will. If in command, I will never surrender the members of my command while they still have the means to resist." For Special Forces, their creed is simply, "I will never surrender, though I am the last." No wiggle room at all there. Historically, Green Berets have taken this promise seriously. In Vietnam, retired Army Colonel Paris Davis was wounded during a firefight and ordered to get to safety, but he refused and ended up saving the lives of 4 fellow soldiers. Davis later wrote, "The enemy forces outnumbered us, but we never went into combat for any other reason than to win."
I was thinking about what we needed to do.
The Green Berets work closely with locals on the ground, which means that on top of knowing the language, they also need to understand the customs and beliefs of the people whose turf they're on. And this often means looking the part, too. When you're a Green Beret in a combat zone, any grooming rules go out the window. The most important thing is that a Green Beret can blend in, and if that means breaking regular Army uniform codes, so be it. Teams that are allowed relaxed grooming standards are known as long hair teams. This applies especially to the majority of the 21st century American conflicts, where beards are more the norm among locals. The Green Berets were founded to tackle combat situations that present complex ethical and tactical choices, but that doesn't mean they get to throw out the whole rule book. Special Forces are still expected to follow the rules of engagement, and if there's even a question of whether they did so, they can find themselves back in the United States facing questions, or even criminal charges. Take the infamous Green Beret affair, for example. While working with the CIA during the Vietnam War, 8 Green Berets were involved in hunting down and killing a suspected double agent. Since the killing was extrajudicial, the 8 men were due to be court-martialed, although the charges were dropped after the CIA flatly refused to let any of their employees testify in court. The whole situation was a disaster for the unit and further divided Americans who disagreed on the war in Vietnam. More recently, during a 2006 operation in Afghanistan, Green Beret Captain Dave Staffel ordered Master Sergeant Troy Anderson to shoot an unarmed man in civilian clothing who was standing about 100 yards away. It would later turn out the man was on an official list of enemy combatants, and therefore the killing was considered acceptable under military rules. Nevertheless, the 2 Green Berets were still investigated twice and almost court-martialed before they were found innocent of wrongdoing. We all know Delta Force exists, but its inner workings are shrouded in mystery, and that's not the only way the unit's unique. Some of their strict rules and regulations even surprise new operators when they join up. As you might expect of one of the most elite US military groups, the requirements to be part of Delta Force are incredibly strict. Just to be considered, recruits need to have been in the military for 2.5 years, have reached the specific rank, be in good disciplinary standing, and be over 21 years of age.
You're taking elite soldiers out of special forces and rangers, and you're training them to ridiculously high levels.
Assuming those basic requirements are met, recruits face grueling training. The first stage is largely physical, with tests of endurance, strength, and combat all part of the deal. The most notorious of those tests is also a navigational challenge, where recruits travel 18 miles over rough, unfamiliar terrain carrying 40 pounds on their back, all in the dead of night.
Out of my 2 classes of 120 people each, probably 12 to 14 made it.
If you make it through that 4-week ordeal, it's off to stage 2, the operator qualification course. There they learn tradecraft, which is basically a how to spy school, and intelligence gathering, counterterrorism, protection tactics, and tests of mental fortitude.
Each of them has been trained in a variety of skills which in more conventional organizations would be distributed among 2 or more individuals.
A Delta Force operator needs to be able to perform at their peak and work with their team in any and all situations. Generally speaking, Delta Force operators are expected to say nothing about their work. Retired Army Colonel Ken Allard told the Washington Times, "Silence is security. Ever since Delta Force was created, they have been the quintessential shadow forces."
The Delta Force doesn't talk much about itself. Indeed, if you talk to the Army, they'll tell you the thing doesn't exist in the first place.
In his book, Inside Delta Force, former Special Forces operator Eric Haney wrote, "Upon assignment to Delta Force, we cease to exist in the regular Army."
Members of this crack unit exist outside the usual U.S. Special Forces command structure.
And that's precisely true. Operators' names and records are wiped from the Army's systems, as is the existence of Delta Force itself, which utilizes a completely separate system. Delta Force's work is highly secretive, high stakes, and often bloody. An anonymous source who was once stationed at the same base as a Delta Force unit put it even more bluntly to Rolling Stone, saying, "On deployment, they literally go around blasting people's brains out. They have zero remorse."
All the kinds of things that scare ordinary people to death, these are the kinds of things Delta Force loves to do.
Just so we're clear, these aren't merciless killing sprees conducted under rules of engagement only for Delta Force. On the contrary, they're expected to follow the same rules as any other US soldier on the battlefield or in hostile territory. The difference is it's all about the assessment of risk. If an operator is directly threatened, such as an enemy holding a weapon in their face, they're allowed to fight back. And if they perceive a potential threat, say thinking that an apparently unarmed individual might be about to carry out an act of violence, they're allowed to act, preemptively eliminating the threat. So as long as they perceive the threat, it's fire away. Many of the skills that Delta Force operators bring from the Army are vital to success in the Special Forces, but not everything applies to life in their new unit. Even during peacetime, soldiers are given explicit schedules detailing where they're supposed to be, what they're expected to do, who they'll be training with, and even what they'll be eating on any one day. In a war zone, this remains pretty much the same. Soldiers know how they're expected to act in given situations. And for many enlistees, the order and regulation provides comfort. But that's not how it is for Delta Force, something that's made very clear very early in the recruitment process.
It's not always the best guy that makes it. It's the right guy. That's the key.
Trainees generally aren't told how they're doing compared to their peers, and are often not told where they're headed, even as they're loaded onto trucks and driven to a particular location.
And while some welcome the unknown, others are uncomfortable remaining in the dark about what's happening in the coming hours or even days. Given that Delta Force handles dangerous, high-priority missions, its operators are taught very early on that they need to be able to improvise and adapt on the fly no matter what. And above all else, they should keep Murphy's Law in mind. This is drilled into Delta Force operators throughout their training. There's a good example of this in Eric Haney's Inside Delta Force. Recruits were given a training mission: protect a U.S. ambassador to a foreign country, called the Principal. It sounds easy in theory, but there's far more to the job than a civilian could imagine.
Ambo have any tactical experience?
No. He has us.
The best way forward is to avoid risky situations, but even in circumstances that seem safe on the surface, anything could happen. On the less life-threatening end, a flat tire could mess with the principal's schedule. On the other hand, the principal could be having a private dinner with friends when rockets land on the house and set it on fire. Or someone could attack the principal in a public space. You get the picture. All of these were real scenarios recruits were faced with. The lesson was, always expect something bad to happen and be ready to act. The Army preaches the idea that it's best to train the way you fight. However, that's rarely followed in practice. One example given by Haney is marksmanship. Shooting using a sight is one skill, but shooting while running and looking at a target rather than directly through the sight is another. Most soldiers aren't trained to switch between the two, and the lack of that kind of training can hurt their ability on the battlefield. Delta Force works differently. Haney writes, "In Delta, the only unit in the entire Army on continual war footing, we didn't have the luxury of wasted training time. That means learning to shoot from any position and how to avoid accidental friendly fire. That kind of mistake would stop the training session and require the operator in question to explain what they did wrong. Delta Force training is deadly serious." Hayes describes a surprise lesson where the recruits played the part of confused hostages while their instructors carried out the exercise themselves, all while using live ammunition.
Sounds that you are hearing are live rounds. You will get the fear out of you.
When we think about soldiers in the modern era, there's a good chance most of us have a specific clean-cut image in mind. Although standards have loosened somewhat in recent years, there are still some fairly specific guidelines that all soldiers have to follow. Hair has to be pinned in one of only a few ways and must be a natural color. Delta Force has a more relaxed grooming policy that includes longer hair, bushier beards, and sometimes even civilian clothing instead of military uniforms. In fact, operators are encouraged to deviate from the traditional military look. After all, if they don't look military, it's easier for them to go undercover and pass as civilians. In some cases, operators have even used their long facial hair in order to cross cultural divides and build friendships with authorities and civilians in foreign countries. And this goes for women too. Yes, there are female members of Delta Force. All the makeup and earring rules for the regular Army don't apply to the Delta Force women. Camaraderie is the kind of thing you hope for, especially for a group dealing with life and death situations. But compatibility can't be forced, and it doesn't seem like something that could be a rule. Once again, that's not the case for Delta Force. Just like anybody in a workplace situation, one recruit might just get a bad gut feeling about another one. And anybody who's watched reality TV knows that being forced to live together in close quarters is a recipe for conflict. But Delta Force operators need to be a close-knit unit in order to survive, even if the process isn't always pretty. That said, there is one specific rule Delta Force members aren't allowed to break under any circumstances. Never lay an angry hand on a brother operator. Never, no matter how heated things get. If an operator breaks that rule, repercussions are immediate, and there's no leniency. According to Eric Haney, punishment was immediate expulsion from Delta Force, something he knew had happened only once in the unit's long history. U.S. Special Operations Forces might seem to exist in a separate world in which they don't interact much with other branches of the military. SEAL Team 6, for example, typically goes out on missions alone. But Delta Force doesn't operate like that at all. They were always designed to work with the rest of the military rather than apart from it. This has enabled the unit to take on a large number of missions over the years without drawing attention to itself. This includes one of Delta Force's best-known missions, 2003 capture of Saddam Hussein. While it was a Delta Force operation, the actual legwork required both Special Forces operators and conventional soldiers working side by side.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
In comparing the two Special Operations Forces units, retired Colonel Ken Allard told the Washington Post, "The SEALs are short-term killers. Delta has a lot of other missions. It shows how well integrated the Delta Force guys are with the conventional forces." On the surface, it might seem like Delta Force operates under a strict code of conduct, but there are some stories out there that'll leave you wondering whether the truth is something much darker. And when it comes to the rule about not laying hands on a fellow soldier, does that apply only to fellow Special Forces operators or to servicemen and women in general?
22 months ago, a man I had just met raped me in a dark alley area behind a party he was throwing.
For instance, in 2016, newly appointed Lieutenant Erin Scanlon received a posting at Fort Bragg. Shortly after her arrival, she was invited to an event hosted by Special Forces operators, including the highly decorated Cristobal Lopez Vallejo, who flaunted his name and reputation. Scanlon alleged that Vallejo raped her that night, but when she tried to hold Vallejo accountable in court, she was blocked at every turn. Her military-appointed lawyers were continually replaced, and as a result, weren't familiar with her case. Scanlon was then manipulated into changing venue to a military court-martial, where rape conviction rates are known to be lower. She was kept away from the proceedings and left uninformed by her legal team, and the tapes of the court-martial were destroyed. Despite evidence supporting Scanlon's claims, the defense won by, among other things, ignoring the lack of credibility of some of their own witnesses and engaging in tactics that were, if not illegal, still unethical. At the end of it, Vallejo walked free. He died in 2023 as a result of a car accident. Scanlon believes that Vallejo's career with Delta Force was what saved him from facing justice, not exactly the shining reputation the elite unit likes to project. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is a moving, emotional spot, and members of the elite military unit who guard the tomb 24/7 follow a unique and demanding code of conduct. Tomb guards don't only have to know about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, they also need to know the history of Arlington National Cemetery, where the tomb is located. And we're not talking about a quick one-page summary with a smattering of details. We're talking about 7 full pages about the cemetery and the people buried there, including Presidents William Howard Taft and John F. Kennedy.
The original idea for the memorial was imagined as the nation reeled in the aftermath of World War I, with thousands of American troops missing and unaccounted for.
The first military burial at Arlington National Cemetery took place in 1864, which was a tumultuous time. So there's a lot of background to be learned, like the fact that Arlington is on the grounds of Robert E. Lee's former home. Nothing ironic about that at all. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. Let us know in the comments if you want to hear about it. Anyway, the guards are also expected to memorize the locations of the graves of hundreds of veterans. In addition to all of that information, guards are required to learn specific facts about the U.S. Army, and of course, their own specific military unit. During the initial phase of training, potential tomb guards are required to recite all that information verbatim in order to move on to the second phase.
The entire process takes 6 to 9 months with an overall attrition rate of 90%.
The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier honors unidentified service members who gave their lives in combat. Because of the significance and symbolism of the tomb, it's guarded every second of every day, whether it's a scorching summer afternoon or a chilly winter night.
You're constantly looking for anybody that would dishonor, disgrace, or disrespect the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Soldiers began guarding the tomb in 1926 to deter tourists from disturbing the sites, but at the time it was only guarded in the daytime. That changed in 1937 when the Army declared that the tomb would be watched over around the clock.
You get a sliver in the night to guard the unknown soldiers when nobody else is around and America's entrusting you to be there.
The tomb guards keep a rigid schedule, with the changing of the guard happening every 30 minutes in the summer, from early April to late September, and every hour in the winter, from early October to late March. When the cemetery closes for the night, the shift change happens every 2 hours. There's a strict order to the guards' rotation. According to the Society of the Honor Guard, the tomb guards work on a 3-relief team rotation: 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, 96 hours off. Needless to say, taking on the position of sentinel demands genuine commitment and dedication.
The Tomb Guard Badge is the second least awarded identification badge in the United States Army, only second to the Army Astronaut Badge.
Each part of the Tomb Guard's precise routine has a meaning. As laid out on the cemetery website, the guard marches 21 steps down the black mat behind the tomb, turns and faces east for 21 seconds, turns and faces north for 21 seconds, and then takes 21 steps down the mat. This process is repeated until the changing of the guard occurs. So why do all of these steps incorporate the number 21? Like everything the tomb guards do, the number 21 has a special meaning. It's a direct nod to the 21-gun salute, a display of high honor and respect in the military. There's a rich history associated with the 21-gun salute, which is used to honor certain notable figures, including the US President and members of the British royal family. The guards, or sentinels, at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier must meet strict criteria to be selected, like having a clean service record and being in excellent shape. All doable, but there's one requirement they can't control: their height. According to the Arlington National Cemetery website, male tomb guards must be between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 4 inches, while women must be between 5 feet 8 inches and 6 feet 2 inches tall. Yes, that's a super specific requirement, but it's important for the unified look of the changing of the guard ceremony that the guards look relatively similar. The height requirement also extends to the relief teams, who stand guard as the official ceremony commences. Another interesting part of the Sentinels' routine has to do with the position of their rifle. Before a guard turns to march down the mat, they quickly and precisely place the rifle on the shoulder that faces onlookers. The reason for this is rooted in the mission of the tomb guards: to protect the tomb at all times. The rifle resting on the shoulder facing the crowd symbolizes the guard's position as the line of defense between the outside world and the tomb. The Sentinels protect the tomb from any threats, including tourists who step out of the designated viewing area to get a closer look. Guards also tell the crowd to quiet down if they're too loud, especially during the changing of the guard.
In keeping with the dignity of this ceremony, it is requested that everyone remain silent and standing.
A Sentinel's uniform is serious business, and a good portion of their training is dedicated to its preparation and upkeep. Each guard is given 4 dress uniforms and trained to professionally steam press them. Once they're officially tomb guards, they can spend up to 10 hours each day keeping their kit in tip-top shape, from cap to perfectly shined shoes. And just in case someone's tempted to slack off, uniforms are meticulously inspected before each shift to ensure they're perfect.
All of the candidates' uniforms are torn apart and rebuilt from the ground up in order to achieve their standard of perfection.
The reason guards put so much time and care into their uniforms is because of what those uniforms represent, not just to themselves, but to the outside world. In a 2013 interview for Military Benefits, Private First Class Isaac Redman, a tomb guard, said,
"Putting work into your uniforms, getting them good, is just the same as you doing well outside, because it's honoring the unknowns."
It's not only about looking put together as you watch over the tomb, it's about paying tribute to the unknown soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Most members of the military are required to follow guidelines when it comes to their appearance, but rules for the tomb guards are far more strict. They must always be clean cut in order to properly represent the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment and honor the tomb. Visitors to Arlington National Cemetery are constantly watching them, after all. But it's not just about a daily shave and slicking your hair back. Sentinels don't go more than 9 work days without getting 2 haircuts. This keeps their hair neat and helps ensure that all guards' hair is similar in length. Another way the tomb guards show respect for the unknowns is by not wearing anything that reflects their military rank. This is to be sure they don't outrank any of the fallen soldiers who lie in the tomb, in a gesture of utmost respect.
For me, it represents all soldiers past, present, and future, and it states that we will never forget their honor.
A pair of white cotton gloves are a must-have for tomb guards. These gloves aren't just for appearance sake. The gloves are sprayed with water to help guards better grip their rifles and prevent them from fumbling the weapons, or even worse, dropping them during their shift. The dampened white gloves are so important to tomb guards that there's a spray bottle filled with water in a large green box next to the tomb. Guards can enter and spray their gloves if needed, ensuring they keep a good grip on their weapons. But don't worry about them having wet hands during winter. In an interview with the Weather Channel, former tomb guard Herb Smith said that, unlike when he was a Sentinel 50 years ago, guards today can wear leather gloves while on duty during the colder months.
And I would have killed for that.
The rifles guards carry as they watch over the tomb are an important part of their overall look, and as such, they need to be in perfect condition without a speck of dirt on them.
When it rains, the weapons, they're highly polished steel. They can rust instantly.
If the rifle is dirty, it could spell disaster for a tomb guard's career. Just ask former guard Ethan Morris about the day he walked out of tomb quarters with a dirty rifle. His staff sergeant inspected the weapon by gliding his white glove over it. When the glove came back with dirt on it, Morris was sent back to the quarters to get a clean weapon.
Got sent back from the inspection block. I was crying. I was at the bottom. I thought I was going to be released.
Morris didn't get released over this incident, but his story serves as a cautionary tale for Sentinels. Before you head into the plaza, you better make sure your weapon is clean.